You're listening to WTMFI 67.42 FM Chicago.
Good evening and welcome everybody to WTMFI 67.42 FM Chicago. I am TJ Fanpool, also known as Turbo TJ, tonight we're going to be going over the Star Wars Facts of the Week. So let me just get my sheets in order here. Hope you all had a good evening. Lolo Frosty, welcome in. General Munchkin, welcome in. So I'm just getting started here. We're going to be going through my weekly review of the Star Wars Facts of the Day that I ran all week. So during the week, I post up a Star Wars Fact of the Day, and it's based off of an actual fact. You know, I do my research through Wikipedia and all the fan sites, as well as through Disney, making sure that all the information I have is factual and goes through the proper channels. I put up it's just a simple fact, something that almost everybody would be able to look up on their own. So that way there's no confusion or anything, or that I'm not trying to start anything or to argue with anybody about anything. So all my information is factual. It's not made up. And I just do it just for fun, just to see if we can get some extra views and people that show an interest in Star Wars. Max, welcome in. So each day during the week, I post those up. And then at the end of the week, I do a review of the facts. Jig, welcome in. So basically, from my experience with Star Wars, I am a huge Star Wars fan. I've been a fan since Star Wars came out in 1977. I was about 2.5 years old when the movie came out. I have been a fan ever since. I have been reading the books, seeing the TV shows, watching stuff since I was as far back as I can remember. I remember watching Empire Strikes Back right up until Return of the Jedi came out. I saw Return of the Jedi in the theater. It's the only movie that I did. Star Wars movie that I actually saw in the theater when I was a kid, and I was there with my 3 sisters, my mom, my aunt, and my cousins. We all watched the movie. The Rancor scared the crap out of us. We were cheering when we saw the Ewoks on screen, and honestly, there was so much to love about that movie. I mean, the main thing that I always remember was the Rancor, because that thing scared the crap out of me, but everything else was great, and so I've been a Star Wars fan ever since. I had access to the movies. I watched Star Wars Droids and Star Wars Ewoks when it was on Saturday mornings. I saw both the Ewok Adventure, which is the Caravan of Courage, and then I saw the Battle for Endor, which was after that. And, of course, I saw all the little things, when Luke Skywalker and R2 and C-3PO were on The Muppet Show. I saw when the Muppet Babies, they did their own Star Wars episode, which is one of my all-time favorite episodes. I mean, there's so much that I have watched with Star Wars. So, and then when the Thrawn books came out, I got into those, and I started reading. Some of the stuff that came out in the 80s, early 90s. So, like Star Wars: Splinter of a Mind's Eye, the Han Solo adventures, the Lando Calrissian adventures, the comic books. Marvel had a long run of Star Wars comic books that technically were not canon at the time. But, Marvel was coming out with anything regardless. And then, of course, we had, the comics that came out from Dark Horse. There was Dark Empire. They started doing the X-Wing series. And then Michael A. Stackpole took up the job. Mr. Tubo, welcome in. Maya, welcome in. So I've been involved in Star Wars for well over 30 years. And I went to the theaters and saw when they remastered the entire saga. Loved all the additional pieces that they added in because it made the movies longer and more enjoyable. The fact that we actually got more time with Boba Fett and so many other characters, I loved it. And then, of course, Phantom Menace came out. I was overjoyed when the first trailer dropped. I wish I had been smart enough to start shooting video of myself doing that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, I never did. But I was in the theaters watching everything. Absolutely loved everything about Star Wars. And I've never stopped being a fan. I was ridiculed for most of my life because I was a Star Wars fan. And that never deterred me. I never backed down from it. I've always had Star Wars close to my heart and my mind. So doing the facts of the day is just a way for me to express my love of Star Wars in that way. So thanks for everybody that's in right now. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So let's start out with the facts of the week. Facts of the day, recap for the week. Okay, first fact. I posted up on Monday. Star Wars fact of the day. Jedi lightsaber training starts at a very young age. Training lightsabers were used to practice lightsaber combat. Training lightsabers of various kinds were most often used before Padawan they went under. Used before they underwent the gathering. Sorry, I got myself caught up in my own words there. Also known as youngling lightsabers, practice sabers or training sabers were non-lethal training implements that were used often by Jedi younglings in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Over time, a Jedi youngling or Padawan would receive lightsaber training under multiple masters in order to find an appropriate style for both defensive and offensive combat. There are 7 classical lightsaber forms, and just so you are all aware, each of these forms is actually based off of a combat blade in modern day. Any one of these is based off of an actual sword combat that was used for generations, majority of the time, throughout the world. So these were originally ancient and classic sword styles, combat styles, that were adapted for lightsabers. So the first form was Shi-Cho, the most ancient foundational form designed for training and handling multiple opponents, emphasizing disarming techniques. Form 2, Makashi, an elegant, precise dueling style on one-on-one... I misspoke there. Oh, dang it. I'm sorry, the chat window's blocking someone. Focusing on one-on-one combat, blade manipulation, and efficiency of movement perfected by Count Dooku. Form 3, Soreyusu, the ultimate defensive form, emphasizing evasion, minimizing exposure, and exhausting opponents, mastered by Obi-Wan Kenobi. Form 4, Ataru, a highly acrobatic, aggressive, and fast-paced. Sorry, chat window's blocking it. It uses force-enhanced jumps and flips to overwhelm opponents, as you saw used by Yoda. Form 5, Shien Dejim So, focuses on turning defense into offense. Shin specializes in blocking blaster fire, when DJM So focuses on overpowering opponents with raw strength and counterattacks, favored by Anakin Skywalker. Form 6, Niman, a balanced, moderate form that blended elements of all forms. It's a popular among diplomatic Jedi, often called the diplomat's form. Form 7, Joyo or Vapid, extremely aggressive and intense. Joyu draws on dark side emotions, while Vapid requires intense focus. Sorry, I should have specified. Joyu draws from the dark side emotions, while Vapid requires intense focus and discipline to channel that inner fury, allowing users to fight with controlled fury. Now, I included some additional variants on this and specialized techniques. Jar Kai, the art of using 2 lightsabers simultaneously, which was used throughout the series, but the one who was an expert at it was Ahsoka Tano. She started out using a reverse lightsaber, lightsaber stance, but she also ended up using 2 lightsabers. But an interesting thing about the way Ahsoka Tano uses hers is she has one regular length lightsaber, but her other one is a shorter lightsaber, which I forgot to write this down, but I believe is called a show. I'm not 100% sure on that. I have to look it up. I meant to type it down. Oh, in my next one up. Reverse grip, a style of holding a lightsaber with the blade pointing backwards, which was used to great effect by Ahsoka Tano. Now, this is one that was requested. I made sure I looked this up. It was by OBY, who is one of my followers. Treta style, which is a rare technique involving deactivating the blade mid-combat to bypass defenses. Now, technically, this was actually a Sith form, but it has been used by Jedi in the past. And then Sing, a combat maneuver allowing you to jump over an opponent's attack. Now, unfortunately, as a lot of you who are fans of Star Wars know, this was attempted by Anakin Skywalker when he was facing Obi-Wan on Mustafar. And unfortunately, as we all know from the high ground stance, Obi-Wan was at a higher position And Anakin believed he could flip over him in order to get an offensive position. Unfortunately, he failed. Now, everybody could argue about that left and right, but we're not going to get into that right now. Unless you want to, please bring it up in the chat. Last one, flowing water cut. Waiting for an opponent to strike and then following through with a counterattack. So a lot of those techniques, and this is an interesting fact about those techniques, is a lot of them were developed after the last of the prequels, which was Revenge of the Sith. So the reason why that was done was because so many different lightsaber styles were viewed during the combat on Geonosis, and a lot of these techniques, people were noticing that the Jedi were using different lightsaber stances when they went into combat. And this was emphasized during the Battle of Geonosis, where you actually see so many Jedi in combat and not using the same techniques that everybody else used. And you really saw it in the battle with Darth Maul and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn during the Duel of Fates, where you saw the different techniques that both Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan were using versus Darth Maul. Whereas Darth Maul was using technically two lightsabers at the same time. He was just using it in a pole form. But it was a very big thing, and George Lucas actually, according to what I read, he actually specifically brought in swordsman specialists for the prequels to really show, because the whole thing was that the Jedi were properly trained throughout their training, and from youngling all the way up to Jedi Master. They were consistently trained, especially if they survived and were able to maintain their skills. But they also would gain a specific stance style that worked for them and their connection and flow through the Force, which is the reason why the Jedi have their combat tactics that they have, is because they learned it and then trained with specific masters that worked with the training arc that they had. Which a lot of people theorize that that's the reason why Ahsoka was assigned to Anakin Skywalker, is because her attitude and the way she did things was very similar to the way Anakin did things. Her sword style, the way she viewed things, the way she acted, very similar. Which is also, if you can see, is the reason why Qui-Gon had Obi-Wan for an apprentice, because there were aspects of Obi-Wan's fighting style and Qui-Gon's fighting style that were very similar. It's the reason why you noticed that when they were fighting. And you can see that really throughout Clone Wars and the prequels and all that. When you see the Jedi, you can actually see if they have a Padawan or a learner with them, their styles are very similar. That's the reason why when you see Kanan's lightsaber style is very similar to his master Balaba. Right at the beginning of Bad Batch, you get to see how the way she uses her lightsaber, and you actually catch some of that in the way Kanan does his lightsaber work in Star Wars Rebels. And especially when you see him running from the Bad Batch, a lot of his style is very similar to hers. I mean, heck, he uses the same flying kick that Balaba uses when she's defending herself. So this is some really cool stuff. If you get a chance to go back and watch some of these techniques, it is really cool to watch the Jedi, their Padawans, and the way they actually learn and use their Jedi tactics, especially in lightsaber combat. It's really cool. So I went into detail on that a lot more than I usually do, but I really wanted to cover a lot of that because I found so much more information that I originally wasn't sure if I was going to do a second one of this. I do tend to go over the facts a couple times. Like I will touch on one fact and then I will touch another fact that ties into that. I did it last week with the Mandalorians. And and by the way, I should mention, pretty much all of my broadcasts that I do for the Star Wars Facts of the Day, I do upload them to another site. You can find the link on my profile. If you want to watch my past ones, you can definitely do that. They're both, each one I try to do only an hour long. So I try to get through all the facts and stuff like that. And if I have enough time, I do questions and stuff afterwards. Landon, thank you for the share. I'm sorry if I haven't been saying hi to everybody. Sorry about that. When I get talking, I tend to focus on the information and I stop looking at the chat. So I apologize if I didn't say hi to you when you came in. Landon, thank you so much for the share. Okay, moving on to the next fact. So Star Wars fact of the day, Bacta treatment is a highly advanced medical process using a gelatinous fluid to rapidly regenerate tissue, nerves, and skin, healing severe injuries. Patients with severe injuries are usually submerged in a Bacta tank. Bacta treatment in the Star Wars universe is a medical process using a gelatinous fluid to promote rapid regeneration by using microscopic organisms to repair organic compounds. Patients with severe injuries are usually submerged in a Bacta tank with an oxygen mask. This is a process that can mend deep wounds, regenerate tissue, nerves, and skin, and other severe injuries. While tanks are standard for medical injuries, Bacta can be applied via spray, patch, or in portable inflatable tubes, usually to wrap around an arm or something like that. This is widely used for rapid medical treatment in emergencies or battlefield treatments. This healing process cannot restore severed or detached limbs. Now, the origins of Bacta is still non-canon, but is currently accepted as fact by both fans and by the movies and stuff like that. So I don't know if, how much of you, Ahmed, welcome in. There's a lot of information about Star Wars and the Bacta tank that's used throughout the entire run of the series. It's brought up in the original trilogy. You see Luke gets severely injured when he's going up against the Wampa on Hoth, and he ends up submerged in a Bacta tank. You actually see this again in the sequel series at The Last Jedi. You see Finn is actually wrapped in the inflatable tubing that is basically circulating Bacta in him to heal his injuries. If you watch Book of Boba Fett, Boba Fett actually has a Bacta tank that he's actually healing from the months and months of injuries that he sustained while he was not only inside the Sarlacc, but also when he was with the Sand People, because he received severe damages, burns, and all kinds of stuff during his time, not only with the Sand People on Tatooine, but just generally the acid damage and stuff that he had from when he was inside the Sarlacc, which a lot of you probably remember from Return of the Jedi, where Boba actually falls into the Sarlacc and he's actually, being digested. And that was something that actually a lot of fans had gotten into for so long, is that a lot of fans did not believe Boba Fett was actually dead because he was wearing the armor. I mean, a lot of the other characters and guys that fell into the Sarlacc pit, they were just, flesh and rags and stuff like that. As far as they knew, you were definitely dead. But Boba, everybody believed that he had an oxygen tank and stuff like that, so he would be able to survive. And it turns out he did. But when you see him in Book of Boba Fett, when he finally comes out of the Sarlacc pit, he peels off his armor and stuff like that because he's covered in the digestive acids and stuff like that. So he's finally able to actually get free. But then, of course, the Jawas take his armor. He's left behind. The Sand People find him. All that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting that he went for so long with all those scars and stuff like that. But when you see him by the end of the Book of Boba Fett, he's completely healed. So Bacta is a really great regenerative and healing material. Now, there is a full detailing on Wikipedia.com about Bacta, its backstory, and there are literally, and this is something I want to actually point out. I'm actually going to load up the website so you guys can actually see it here. Hang on one second. Let me make sure I'm visually doing this right. I want to make sure everybody can see it. So on Wikipedia.com, there are both I hate when it does it like this. So hang on a second. Let me get this. Dang it. I lost it. I'm doing my best to get this going here because people have been criticizing some of my facts and stuff like that, and I want to make sure I include this information so everybody can see it. So on the website, you can actually see there is a canons and a legends that's actually given for Bacta. So you can literally look up what the canon is for right now, but there is also the legends where you can actually click on it and it does switch over to a different explanation of what Bacta is and everything that's involved with it that was covered in the Star Wars material that was in Legends and the expanded universe that was originally came out in the 90s. Now, a lot of people will argue to the moon that, the Legends information is not actually factual, but that information isn't entirely true, that for the longest time, that was considered fact. And many of the materials that were brought up in the expanded universe were covered. Vorak, welcome in. were covered by LucasArts, and they actually referenced it multiple times in other books and other materials. Now, officially, George Lucas didn't actually say that all the books were canon, but the people that he worked with on the books, a lot of them took up the reins for that in his name. So they said that it was factual. So a lot of the information that we have from Legends is partially true because a lot of it is referenced in the current canon through Disney. So a lot of this information that you could look up on there, you're going to have questions about it. A lot of it is true. A lot of it is not technically canon. But if you want to take it as true, you can. Because as of right now, the origins of Bacta in Disney has not been set. They haven't gone through the whole details about how Bacta is made, how it's manufactured, how it's sold, how it's administered, all that kind of stuff. A lot of it is just word of mouth that we get from the movies and the TV shows. So as far as we know, what is in the movies and TV shows is how it is applied. So submerged in a tank, wrapped around, or patches or something like that. That's pretty much how we've known it and accepted that that's how it works. But technically, there isn't an actual canon rundown by Disney about how it works. You can look it up on Disney's main website, and they go into a little bit of detail, but they don't go into as much detail as Wikipedia, which is the reason why there's both the canon and the Legends version. So just to make sure everybody understands about how I do my research, I check Wikipedia, I check Disney, I do a full view on everything, so that way the information I'm passing on is actually factual by the material that's available. Okay, sorry for going into a little bit of detail on there. I wanted to make sure I covered all my bases. Okay, next fact. Star Wars fact of the day. Red and blue are the most common color of lightsaber in Star Wars. Blue representing the Jedi and red representing the Sith. There are also colors depending on the kyber crystal and the bond with the Force user. So, sorry, let me get my facts up here. Lightsaber colors in Star Wars are determined by the kyber crystal bond with the Force user, typically reflecting the path of that Jedi or user. The most common ones are blue, which stands for a warrior guardian, and green, which stands for a negotiator counselor. But those are the most common ones for the Jedi. While red, created by the dark side users through the bleeding of the crystals, is there's not really one particular path that goes with the red lightsaber. It's pretty much a focus on power. The main subject matter of the red lightsaber is to represent power. But there are additional colors that are actually common, and a lot of you, I'm sure, have seen in Star Wars, in the movies and the animation. Purple, which is a rare but also a dual alignment path that the Jedi is on. So Mace Windu is a prime example of that. Yellow, Sentinel or Guardian, which, if you remember from several episodes, Tom, welcome in. There are several episodes of Star Wars Rebels where you actually see the Sentinel Guardians of the Jedi Order. They actually have yellow lightsabers. So Sentinel Guard is the ones that are the most well known. Now, white, which has only recently been seen, is a purified color. And that was accepted, but is not always bonded specifically directly with a Jedi user, at least not from youth. Because a white is basically a purified crystal after it's gone through the bleeding process. So, and I covered this last week in a previous one, that the bleeding process is when a Sith takes a kyber crystal either from a Jedi that he's defeated or that he steals from one of the planets that it's on, and then he bleeds. He forces his hate, his fear, all of that and darkness into the kyber crystal, and it turns it into a red crystal, and then they use it for their lightsabers. When it's purified, that's when a Jedi, and it has to be someone with a particular level of skill, basically takes the bleeding process and pushes it out of that kyber crystal, which basically clears all the hate and fear and anger and darkness out of that crystal and turns it into pure white, which is the purest form of lightsaber. And we all know, anybody that's watched Star Wars knows that Ahsoka Tano's lightsabers are white due to the fact that when she left the Jedi Order and when she left her lightsabers on the planet after Order 66, she did not have a lightsaber. For the longest time, when she went into hiding, she relied completely on the Force and her own skills of survival that Anakin had taught her and that she learned during her time with the Jedi Order to survive outside in the outside galaxy. And this is actually covered in detail in the Ahsoka novel, if you get a chance to read it, though technically parts of the novel have been decanonized, but it's still, a lot of that really goes into the detail of how Ahsoka survived. And it's really interesting to see how one person who was raised up with the Jedi Order has to figure out how to survive in the real world where she knows that she's being hunted by the Empire. So knowing how to stay under the radar, staying out of sight, behind the scenes, which we saw a lot in both Obi-Wan Kenobi and in Andor, of people trying to stay below the radar and stay out of sight. And that's exactly what Ahsoka had to do. And then when she finally encountered a Sith, she defeated him. And this is actually covered in Tales of the Jedi, of how Ahsoka actually defeated the Inquisitor. And that's how she got her kyber crystals that she used for her lightsabers. Now, we never actually see the purifying process. It's mostly written out. But I believe the process for bleeding a lightsaber has been done. We saw it in the live-action series of Star Wars Acolyte. And if you read the Marvel Comics Darth Vader Star Wars series, you actually see how Darth Vader bleeds his kyber crystal. So you can look all this information up, and it's all available through both Wikipedia and Disney. So you can actually look this information up for yourself. Now, if you have any disputes against my facts, please reach out to me, let me know, and we can go over this stuff and we can figure out where I screwed up, what I missed. There's no reason for this to get hostile or anything like that. I'm more than willing to hear somebody else's opinion. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm more than willing to hear someone out. But there's no reason to get, negative about it. Okay. Let's move on to the next fact. So, Star Wars fact of the day. The T-65B X-Wing starfighter, designed by Incom Corporation, was intended as the primary fighter for the Galactic Empire. After the Empire chose TIE fighters, Incom designers defected to the Rebel Alliance, providing the plans. Incom Corporation based the T-65B X-Wing starfighter designs off of the ARC-170 starfighter and the Z-95 Headhunter starfighter, both used in the Galactic Republic during the Clone Wars. It became the backbone of the rebellion due to its versatility, shielding, and superior performance as both a multifunctional airspace superiority fighter. Both as a multifunction airspace superiority fighter. Okay, sorry about that. I got ahead of myself in the thing. X-Wings became famous for their 4 laser cannons and S-foils, which opened for combat, providing a better firing range and stability. They were notable for being able to stand against TIE fighters, even though TIE fighters were faster and more maneuverable. Possessing both shields and a hyperdrive, the X-Wing didn't need a ship to transport them to a combat zone like TIE fighters did, making them the best for hit-and-run strikes against Imperial targets. Now, to really emphasize a lot of this, you get to see this. If any of you have ever played some of the Star Wars video games, you actually get in Star Wars Battlefront, the original one that came out in 2005, you really got an emphasis between the X-Wing starfighter and the RC-179 fighter, because both of them were used in the game for the space sections. One was for during the Rebel Alliance against the Empire, and the other was for the Clone Wars for the Republic versus the Separatists. So you really see the S-foil aspect, and you even get a shot of that in Revenge of the Sith at the end of the prequels. And it's really a cool vision of how that all comes together and how the corporation designs the starfighter and how it eventually gets built and spread out. And I personally thought it was super cool that they finally brought in the airship that would eventually become the expansion. But what I really liked was in the Clone Wars TV series, you actually got to see the Z-95 Headhunter starfighter, which, if you don't know this, the Z-95 did not exist at all in any of the material from Clone Wars or the prequels or of from the original trilogy. The origin of the Z-95 Headhunter was in the Expanded Universe books. The reason why I know this is because I was a big fan of the Star Wars book series, and they specifically go into detail that the pre-existing starfighter from Incom Corporation was the Z-95 Headhunter starfighter that came out right at the end of the Clone Wars. And that goes into detail about that in the books, that its design had the 4 engines on the back. It actually had... it didn't have wings that spread into the X form, but it did have straight out wings. So there is a variation between the ARC-179 starfighter and the Z-95 Headhunter that are both employed in the X-Wing starfighter. You can see it in the way the engines are designed and the way the laser cannons are designed. It's all there and all very similar. So that's the reason why I really got into the whole X-Wings, specifically after the trilogy, the prequel trilogy came out, because you really see the progression of that fighter. Now, they don't go into so much detail on some of the other fighters. You do get to see some of the preliminary designs of the TIE fighters, the TIE interceptors, and the TIE defenders. We actually get a really good look of that in Andor and in Star Wars Rebels. You do get a lot more detail and stuff like that on that fighter design. But the biggest thing was that, and this is something that's only in the EU. They haven't actually brought this up in the new Star Wars stuff by Disney, but it's something that I'm hoping at some point in time we get a look at, was that pirates and planetary systems that didn't have their own air force, they basically took scraps from a lot of different starships and starfighters and tried hodgepodging them together. And in the Expanded Universe, they were actually called Uglies, Uglies. And I always thought some of the designs that you ended up reading about, where they would take the ball cockpit of a TIE fighter and mishing it with Z-95 Headhunter wings with engines sticking out the back. And then they would have the TIE fighter wings on the sides of a Z-95 Headhunter with the TIE fighter guns underneath, which it basically just looks like a long rocket. I don't know how they did the stabilization on that, but and there were actually books you could get that actually showed what the Uglies sort of looked like. And they would basically be hodgepodge pieces of multiple different starfighters slapped together, which artistically I thought was really cool, that some of the artwork you got to see on some of the books and in some of these novels and stuff like that, you actually got to see what these things really looked like. It was really cool. So I recommend looking this stuff up. It's really interesting to see the whole history between the X-Wings and the TIE fighters and the developments all the way up. I'm definitely going to be getting into the facts about the TIE fighter coming up. I don't know if I'll get to it this week. I might get to it the next, but I will definitely. Sorry, I meant this upcoming week, and then the week after. I'm always looking for ideas and stuff like that to go into. Okay, moving on to the next fact. Star Wars fact of the day: during the Clone Wars and Empire eras, Darth Sidious, Lur, welcome in, used bounty hunters and Sith Inquisitors to kidnap Force-sensitive children. This was done for midichlorian research, Sith Inquisitor ranks, spies, and more. Darth Sidious hired Cad Bane and other bounty hunters to kidnap Force-sensitive children during the Clone Wars. This was thwarted by the Jedi, Ahsoka Tano, and Anakin Skywalker, who assisted in the rescue, but it was implicated that it wasn't an isolated incident. Project Harvester was codename for an inquisitorious operation by the Galactic Empire to capture young Force sensitives and turn them into Imperial agents skilled in the ways of the dark side of the Force, all while trying to prevent the Jedi Order from recovering these kidnapped children or Force-sensitive people. It was operated from a secret installation on the planet Arcanus, which was connected to the planet's Imperial headquarters and the Arcanus Academy. In the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, a underground network is shown to be at work to save Force-sensitive individuals for the Empire, both from Order 66 and people who were becoming aware that they had Force capabilities. In Star Wars Rebels, Ahsoka Tano and Kanan Jarrus are involved in rescuing Force-sensitive children from Sith Inquisitors. There are several... Exactly, Baymax. There are several additional canon and legend stories of an underground war over Force-sensitive individuals sought by the Sith but protected by Jedi or Jedi sympathizers. So, little information. When I posted up this fact, some of you, if you guys followed me, you might not have seen this fact come up because it was actually suppressed. I don't know exactly why, but I theorize that this particular fact was suppressed because of the current political and crisis situation that's going on in the United States. So because of the subject matter, they suppressed it from being shown in FYPs because of the subject matter. But all my information was factual, and it's also fictional from Star Wars. But again, a lot of stuff from Star Wars is being suppressed right now. So I believe that's part of the reason why it was suppressed. But my information on this was absolutely factual. You can actually go back into the Star Wars Clone Wars series, and there are, at least, if I remember right, there's 3 episodes that target specifically Force-sensitive people being kidnapped. And so it's not just some random thing that I was bringing up. This is something that was actually happening. And you see it in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, the underground that's going there. You see it in Star Wars Rebels. You actually saw it in the Bad Batch. It was connected to Project Necromancer. And you find out about the kids that were kidnapped and how they don't know where their parents are and stuff like that. So this was brought up in Bad Batch. This is also brought up in several other animated and live action series. Acolyte brings it up in Star Wars Acolyte. You can actually see it there. So there are multiple inclinations where you find out about Sith who are kidnapping Jedi or kidnapping Force-sensitive children or kidnapping people with Force capability. And we really see this in the sequel trilogy with Finn, because Finn was a stormtrooper who realizes and forms Force-sensitive capabilities. And you even get this sense from some of the children they encounter on Endor when they're searching for the dang it, the name just slipped out of my head. Sorry, I meant to write it down. The Wayfinders, that was it. The Wayfinder that they're looking for on the old Death Star, they find in the throne room. So the subject matter is that the Sith and the First Order were going through a process of, we don't know all the details on it, and I'm sure we're going to find out more as the story moves on. But during the time of both the Sith, the Empire, before the Clone Wars, during the Clone Wars, and then after the Clone Wars, that children and Force-sensitive people were being abducted and being used for the Empire's sources, either for spies or for inquisitors or for a different function. Whereas the Jedi and those that supported them were actually trying to save Force-sensitive people. And Ahsoka, we don't know all the details about what she was doing, but it's something that is brought up in Star Wars Rebels, that she brings in Kanan to actually assist with it, but she's actually out on her own doing it. And you actually pick that up from the process of her engaging with the Inquisitors in Star Wars Rebels. So it's really interesting to find out that underneath what we know about Star Wars, there's a darker side of things that are going on during this time period. That the Sith was doing these things. A lot of the Jedi didn't even know it was happening, which goes into the whole aspect of, it was either the Jedi were, so far up in the line, they weren't paying attention to that kind of stuff anymore. And of course, the war came out, so a lot of things got missed because the Jedi were fighting the war when they should have been protecting the public. And the Republic should have been fighting the war, not the Jedi. but again, this was a manipulation done specifically so that the Jedi, because they were supposed to be keepers of the peace, not soldiers. And this aspect is brought up multiple times. And because the Jedi were so busy fighting the Separatists in the war, they weren't doing their job of protecting the people. And this is brought up multiple times in Clone Wars. It's brought up in the Acolyte series. There's so many sections that actually bring up this aspect and this view of the Jedi not doing what they should be doing. So, a lot of this information is available through Wikipedia. I did do a couple searches for it through Disney. I wasn't able to find anything specifically saying it, but I know that they must have it up somewhere because it's actually been brought up in some of the stuff. I just unfortunately I wasn't able to go through absolutely everything. But that is pretty much the end of my facts for this particular week. So I hope you all learned something from this. And if you have any questions or you want to talk about anything, feel free to pop up a question